This was the nation's deadliest shooting in more than 2 years, and police say that the gunman shot 10 people, killed those 8 children, all in this house that is directly behind me, then went up the street, stole a car at gunpoint, led police on a chase. All of this happening early Sunday morning.
There are years that feel cursed from the moment they begin. 2026 has been one of them. January arrived and brought El Moncho with it, a name that spread across every screen, every feed, every conversation until people could not look away no matter how hard they tried. February came and Nancy Guthrie disappeared. No answers, no closure, just silence where a person used to be. Then Lynette Hooker. Then the tension between the United States and Iran that sat at the edge of something no one wanted to name out loud. Crisis stacked on top of crisis. Grief stacked on top of grief. And the year was not even halfway done. Most people were still carrying all of that when April arrived. And then came a Sunday morning in Louisiana that made everything else feel small by comparison. Not smaller because those other things did not matter. Smaller because of what was found inside a house on West 79th Street in Shreveport before the city had even finished waking up. Smaller because of who was found there. Smaller because of how many. 8 children, 1 home, 1 man. Before 6 a.m. on April 19, 2026, all 8 of them were gone. 3 boys and 5 girls. The youngest was 3 years old. She had not yet started school. The oldest was 11. She had barely begun. 7 of the 8 shared a father. The 8th was their cousin, 10 years old, sleeping in the same house because that was where his family lived. All 8 of them went to sleep on a Saturday night. None of them woke up on Sunday morning. The man responsible was named Shamarr Elkins, 31 years old, 7 years in the Louisiana Army National Guard. A father, a husband, a neighbor. People waved at from across the street without thinking twice about it. Hi viewers, here is a question before we go any further into this story. Did you grow up in a household where adults talked openly about mental health, or was it something that was never discussed? Drop your answer in the comments right now. Because what this story is really about, underneath all of it, is what happens when the warning signs are visible to everyone and invisible to the system at the same time.
Were they crawling out of windows to get onto a roof?
Yes, so actually this house right here that you see behind us, there's a window right above the garage. They actually climbed out of that window, we believe, and unfortunately one of the children was actually located deceased on the roof. So we are working to determine, we do believe that he shot the child while the child was on the roof trying to get away.
Shamarr Elkins did not snap. That is the first thing that needs to be said clearly and without any softening around the edges. What happened on the morning of April 19th was not an explosion of sudden rage. It was not a man who lost control of himself in a single moment. Researchers who study this specific category of violence are consistent on that point. The planning came first, the calm came second, and the violence was the conclusion of something that had been building, quietly and in plain sight, for years. The neighbors who waved at him did not know about the 2019 weapons conviction that legally barred him from ever touching a firearm again. The co-workers who described him as a devoted family man did not know about the threat he made in 2023, the one where he looked at his wife and told her directly that if she ever tried to leave and take those children, he would kill her, kill the children, and kill himself. The family members who saw him laughing and joking the night before did not know that divorce papers were already signed and that a court date had been set for the very next morning. Nobody had the whole picture. And the systems that were supposed to connect those pieces, law enforcement, the Veterans Affairs Hospital, the family court, they never did. What you are about to hear is not just the story of what happened inside that house on West 79th Street. It is the story of everything that led to that door. Every record, every warning, every moment where something could have changed and nothing did. This is the full account of Shamarr Elkins, the 8 children who deserved every year that was taken from them, and the question that every person who knew him is now living with permanently. What were the signs? And why wasn't one of them enough? WHO was Shamarr Elkins. Shamarr Dwan Elkins was born on December 7, 1994, in Shreveport, Louisiana. He grew up in Cedar Grove, a north side neighborhood that shaped him early and quietly. The kind of place where everyone eventually knows everyone, where the same streets that raised you are the same streets that remember you. Cedar Grove would become both the beginning and the end of his story.
Just yesterday evening, he was sitting on the porch, and I waved at him, he waved back. The children were in the yard playing. And I just come in the house, and then this morning, we woke up to all of this.
His biological mother, Shamarr Elkins, was a teenager when he was born. She was battling a crack cocaine addiction that made raising a child impossible. So she didn't, not because she didn't love him, but because she couldn't. There is a difference between those two things, and that difference matters to understanding who Shamarr Elkins became. A family friend named Betty Walker stepped in. Betty Walker became the woman who actually raised him. She was his stability, his foundation, the person he came home to, the person who knew him in the way that only someone who raises a child from the beginning can know them. Shamarr and Shamar would not reconnect until the mid-2010s, by which point he was already an adult and already a soldier. At 18 years old, Shamarr Elkins enlisted in the Louisiana Army National Guard. Think about that for a moment. 18 years old, a young man from Cedar Grove who had been raised by someone else's steadiness, who had grown up watching a mother he loved struggle with something bigger than both of them. And he walked into a recruiter's office and signed his name. He served 7 years. His roles were specific and significant. Signal Support Systems Specialist, Fire Support Specialist. Both positions involved weapons systems. Both involved coordinating firepower. Both required operating under pressure without falling apart. He was trained to hold it together when everything around him was coming undone. He was never deployed overseas. In August 2020, after 7 years, he left the Louisiana Army National Guard as a private. The lowest enlisted rank, no deployment, no ceremony worth noting publicly, no documented transition support in any record available. 7 years of military structure, military purpose, military identity, and then civilian life with nothing connecting one world to the other. That gap matters more than it might seem. He went to work at UPS. He showed up. He did the job. His co-worker Willie Vasher spoke to the New York Times about him after everything happened, and Vasher chose his words carefully. He described Elkins as someone who appeared to be a devoted family man. That word, appeared, is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Because Vasher also noticed something else. A bald spot on the back of Elkins's head. Not from genetics, not from age, from stress. Shamarr Elkins pulled his own hair out throughout the workday. Strand by strand, every shift. His family had noticed it too. The people closest to him could see it happening in real time. Nobody asked what it meant. Nobody sat down with him and said, "What is happening inside you right now?" Nobody called a doctor. Nobody connected it to anything. It was visible, consistent, impossible to miss, and it was treated as background noise by everyone who saw it. By 2026, Elkins was living a life that looked ordinary from the outside and was fracturing from within. He had 2 households. He was married to Shaniqua Pugh. Together they had 4 children and shared the home on West 79th Street in Cedar Grove. He also had a previous marriage to Christina Snow, with whom he had 3 more children. Christina lived on Harrison Street, 1 block away from West 79th Street. 1 single block separating his past and his present, his first family and his second, the woman he left and the woman he was now losing. 2 families, 2 sets of financial obligations, a marriage that was actively dissolving, and a criminal record that almost no one in his life knew existed. The pressure across both households was real and it was mounting. There were 7 children between 2 women living within walking distance of each other. There were bills that a UPS salary was expected to cover across 2 separate homes.
The coroner's office here has released the names and the ages of all of those children. 5 girls, 3 boys, all of them between 3 and 11 years old. Now, Elkins has a previous weapons charge, something he pleaded guilty to back in 2019. But Errol, police are still looking into what it was that prompted this shooting Sunday morning.
There was a man who had been trained to hold it together, who had been holding it together in plain view, who was quietly pulling his own hair out every single day at work while everyone around him kept moving. Something was building. It had been building for a long time. And in 2019, it came close to the surface for the first time in a way that should have permanently changed what happened next. It didn't. That decision, that single legal outcome in 2019, is the thread that connects everything. Pull it, and the entire case unravels into something that could have been prevented. Leave it untouched, and you get the morning of April 19, 2026. What Shamarr Elkins did near a school in 2019, and what the legal system did in response, is where this story takes its sharpest turn. In 2019, Shamarr Elkins was arrested near Caddo Magnet High School in Shreveport. According to a police report cited by KTBS, he pulled a 9mm handgun from his waistband and fired 5 rounds at a vehicle approximately 300 feet from the school. Children were present outside at the time. He claimed the driver of that vehicle had pointed a weapon at him first. That claim was considered. The legal process moved forward. And at the end of it, Shamarr Elkins pleaded guilty to illegal use of a weapon. The school property charge was dismissed entirely. He received 18 months of probation. No prison time, probation. And under Louisiana law, that conviction placed a hard legal prohibition on his ability to possess any firearm until at least 2029. Not a suggestion, not a gray area, a documented, enforceable, legal barrier between Shamarr Elkins and any weapon for the next decade. On the morning of April 19, 2026, he had 2 of them. The system that was supposed to prevent that never activated. The prohibition existed on paper. The paper existed in a file. The file sat in a database. And somewhere between that database and the morning he walked into 2 homes, the barrier that was supposed to hold simply didn't. But the firearms conviction is only the first of the things that were missed. The second one is worse. In 2023, Pugh considered leaving Shamarr Elkins. She had reasons. The marriage was not what it had been. There were things she knew and things she suspected and things she had decided she was no longer willing to carry. She raised the possibility of leaving and taking the children with her. His response was immediate. Betty Walker, the woman who raised Shamarr Elkins from childhood, the woman who knew him better than almost anyone alive, later spoke directly to the New York Times about what happened next. According to Walker, Elkins told Shaniqua directly that if she tried to leave and take those children, he would take her life, take the lives of the children, and take his own. A direct threat, spoken clearly, heard clearly, understood by the people in that room, and then dismissed. Elkins told Betty Walker he was just playing. Walker said she ultimately accepted that explanation. Shaniqua stayed. The conversation was folded back into the daily life of that household and treated as something that had passed. 14 months later, in April 2024, Shaniqua and Shamar were married. That threat was never reported to police. It never entered a domestic violence database. It never appeared in a court filing. It never reached a lethality screening. It sat as private family knowledge for nearly 3 years, known to the people who loved him and the woman who had every reason to be afraid of him, and invisible to every institution that might have acted on it. Here is what the research says about threats like that one. Scholars and investigators who study intimate partner violence are consistent on this specific point. Explicit threats made during a separation attempt, the kind where a partner states directly what will happen if the other person tries to leave, are among the strongest measurable predictors of lethal violence. Not impulsive outbursts, not venting, declarations. They function as a statement of ownership. A line drawn in advance. The relationship ends on his terms, or it does not end at all. The fact that Shaniqua stayed does not mean she was not afraid. Studies on this pattern document consistently that the period of attempted separation is statistically the most dangerous window for victims. Many stay precisely because they understand what leaving might cost. Shaniqua's decision to remain was not weakness. It was a calculation made inside a situation the people around her could not fully see. She eventually did file for divorce. The stated reason, confirmed to CNN by Troy Brown, Elkins's brother-in-law who lived in the West 79th Street home, was infidelity. The court date to finalize the divorce was set for Monday, April 20, 2026. The morning after the shooting. That 2023 threat had been sitting inside that marriage for nearly 3 full years. When the legal process of ending the marriage reached its final scheduled moment, when there was no longer any procedural step remaining between Shaniqua Pugh and a life without Shamarr Elkins, something that had been waiting became something that was ready. And the systems that should have known about that threat never did. Because it was never reported. In January 2026, Shamarr Elkins checked himself into the Veterans Affairs Hospital in Shreveport for a mental health evaluation. Troy Brown confirmed this to Time magazine and the Associated Press. Betty Walker confirmed separately to the New York Times that this admission followed a suicide attempt. He recognized that something inside him had reached a point he could not manage alone. He walked through the door of that hospital voluntarily and asked for help. He stayed approximately 10 days. He was discharged. Troy Brown told reporters that when Elkins came home from the VA, he seemed better. He was talking about being a good father, about getting things right. Brown asked him directly whether he thought he needed to go back. Elkins said he was fine, that he would just deal with it. Brown later told the Associated Press, and these words carry the full weight of what came after. He said, "I wish he went ahead and gotten the help." What the VA sent Elkins back into was identical to the environment that had produced the crisis in the first place. A marriage in active dissolution. Financial pressure across two households.
6:07 a.m. A second call was received regarding a shooting in the 500 block of Harrison Street. The caller stated that her boyfriend had shot her, taken her 3 children, and fled the scene. 6:08 a.m.
No documented follow-up support structure. No flagging of the pending divorce as a risk factor. No cross-reference of the 2019 firearms conviction with the discharge plan. No record in any public document of a lethality screening being conducted before he walked back out through those doors. The same storm. The same man. No shelter added. Within weeks of that discharge, the deterioration resumed. Easter Sunday, April 5, 2026. 2 weeks before the shooting. Shamarr Elkins called his mother Mahalia and his stepfather Marcus Jackson. He was crying. He told them that Shaniqua had filed for divorce and that he was drowning in thoughts he could not climb out of. His stepfather tried to talk him through it, tried to offer the kind of reassurance that fathers offer when they do not know what else to give. Elkins replied with a single sentence. "Some people don't come back from their demons." The call ended. No crisis line was contacted. No welfare check was requested. No one called the police. As the New York Times noted in its reporting, most families respond exactly this way because most of the time a call like that one does not produce what happened here. The family's response was not unusual or negligent by any ordinary measure. What was unusual was the picture they could not see. They didn't know about the 2019 conviction. They didn't know the full legal weight of the divorce timeline. They didn't know what the VA had and hadn't documented before sending him home. 5 data points. A weapons conviction. A death threat. A VA discharge. An Easter phone call. A divorce court date set for the following Monday morning. Spread across law enforcement records, the VA system, a family court filing, and private family memory. Never assembled. Never connected. Never handed to a single person whose job it was to see the whole picture before it became a crime scene. Shreveport Police Chief Wayne Smith stood at his Monday press conference after the shooting and said something that has stayed with everyone who heard it. He said the violence stemmed from a domestic situation. Then he added that the chances were good this was not the first time. Implying incidents that went unreported or undocumented. Incidents that existed somewhere between the walls of those homes and never reached the systems designed to respond. The divorce papers were ready. The court was set for the next morning. And at 9 p.m. on the night of April 18th, Troy Brown backed his car out of the driveway of the West 79th Street home, waved at Shamarr Elkins, and drove away to his night shift. Elkins was calm. He was joking around. Inside that house, 10-year-old Markaden Pugh was alive. The last ordinary moment on record came on a Saturday afternoon. April 18, 2026. Freddie Montgomery, a neighbor who lived across the street on West 79th, walked past the house and saw Shamarr Elkins sitting on his front porch. The children were in the yard, playing, the way children play on a warm Louisiana afternoon when they have no reason to be anywhere else. Montgomery and Elkins exchanged a wave. Nothing more. Montgomery told CNN there was nothing in that moment, not a word, not an expression, not a single detail, that suggested anything was wrong. That evening, Elkins took his eldest daughter to dinner. Just the two of them. He posted about it on social media with laughing emojis. A photograph of a father and his child over a meal, the kind of image that reads as warmth and normalcy and presence. The night before he took the lives of her siblings, he was smiling in a photograph with his child on the internet. That detail does not soften what followed. It deepens it, because it is entirely consistent with what behavioral researchers document in cases of familicide. The perpetrator does not spend the final hours in visible distress. He spends them appearing settled, sometimes unusually so. The storm does not show on the surface. It has already moved underground. At 9 p.m., Troy Brown left for his night shift. He backed his car out of the driveway. Elkins helped him move it. They talked. Elkins was joking around, relaxed, present. Brown drove away and went to work, leaving behind his wife, his nephew Markaden Pugh, age 10, and the children of the household he had shared with Shamarr Elkins. Brown's nephew was alive when he pulled out of that driveway. The hours between 9 p.m. and 5:55 a.m. on April 19th have never been fully documented in any public record. Investigators have not released a complete account of that window. What is confirmed is not what happened during those hours. What is confirmed is where they ended. They ended at Harrison Street first. Before Shamarr Elkins went to West 79th Street, before he went to the home where Shaniqua and the children slept, he went 1 block in the other direction. To the home of Christina Snow, his ex-wife, the mother of 3 of his children, the woman who had built a life 1 single block from the house he shared with his current family. He knocked on her door before sunrise. When Christina opened it, he fired 9 times. She was struck 9 times. She did not die. Let that land for a moment. Christina Snow was struck 9 times and she did not die. And what she did in the minutes after, while still on the floor of her own home, bleeding from 9 separate wounds, is the reason investigators had a complete account of what happened at that door before the sun came up. She used Siri. She told her phone to call 911. She remained conscious long enough to give investigators a full account of what had happened to her. Her aunt LaShun Berry confirmed this account to CNN. After the attack on Christina, Elkins gathered all 3 of her children. Braylin, age 5, Kadarian, age 6, Serayah, age 11. He took them from that house and drove them 1 block to West 79th Street. Every child was now in one place. At 5:55 a.m., the Shreveport Police Department received the first call. A disturbance at the 300 block of West 79th Street. The caller said she was on the roof. She said the suspect was inside. She said someone had been harmed. That caller was Kosha Pugh, Shaniqua's sister. She lived in that house. Kosha Pugh was on a roof making emergency calls to police while the attack was still happening beneath her feet. She had her 12-year-old daughter with her. Both of them jumped from that roof. Both of them survived. Both of them sustained broken bones from the fall. Kosha made those calls while it was still happening. By 6 a.m., the dispatch log confirms she and her daughter had escaped from the roof and were in the backyard. Police arrived at 6:01 a.m. Shaniqua Pugh survived. She sustained multiple gunshot wounds to the face and stomach and underwent multiple surgeries, according to her aunt's account to the New York Times. As of the most recent confirmed reporting, she is expected to survive. Troy Brown's wife also survived. She jumped from the roof. Their 2-year-old daughter jumped alongside her and survived with scratches. Brown arrived back from his night shift to a crime scene where his home had been. His nephew, Markaden Pugh, was found inside. Markaden did not survive. Police spokesperson Chris Bordelon confirmed that most of the children appeared to have been harmed while they were still sleeping. 7 of the 8 were found inside the home. The 8th was found on the back roof. There were bullet holes in the rear door. Some of the children had tried to run. The evidence of it was embedded in the wood of that back door, the physical record of small bodies moving toward an exit that came too late. 1 child made it as far as the roof. 1 child almost made it out. Now the names. All of them. Because they are not a statistic and they are not a detail and they should not move through this story as background information. Jayla Elkins, 3 years old. Shayla Elkins, 5 years old. Braylin Snow, 5 years old. Caleb Pugh, 6 years old. Kadarian Snow, 6 years old. Layla Pugh, 7 years old. Markaden Pugh, 10 years old. Serayah Snow, 11 years old. 5 girls and 3 boys. All of them gone before that Sunday morning ended. After leaving West 79th Street, Elkins carjacked a vehicle near the scene. Shreveport police pursued him into Bossier City. The pursuit ended when Elkins stopped the vehicle and produced a handgun. Officers responded and he was struck at the scene. At 7:03 a.m. on April 19, 2026, Shamarr Elkins was pronounced dead. The precise circumstances of his death remain under active investigation. A social media post, attributed to an account identified as belonging to Michael Mayans, described as a former Army mentor of Elkins, claimed that Elkins had come to his home, that the two men spoke briefly, and that Elkins then turned the weapon on himself. That post was subsequently deleted. The Shreveport Bossier Advocate confirmed the claim existed but noted its removal. Louisiana State Police spokesperson Eddie Thomas confirmed the investigation would not be rushed and that findings would be delivered to the Caddo Parish District Attorney's Office. Whether Elkins died from a self-inflicted wound or from officer fire has not been officially resolved. At 6:07 a.m., the Shreveport Police Department received the call from Harrison Street, more than an hour after the first call from West 79th. Dispatch linked both locations at 6:10. At 6:20, officers received information that Christina's 3 children might be inside the carjacked vehicle. At 6:40, they confirmed the vehicle was empty. The Caddo Parish Coroner's Office confirmed all 8 children were found at the West 79th Street address. All 8, including Christina Snow's 3, who had been carried from one home into another in the hours before sunrise, and who never left. 2 weapons were recovered: a small caliber handgun used in the first part of the attack, and a Mossberg rifle-style pistol, described by police as an assault pistol, which Elkins still had on him when officers encountered him in Bossier City. Both weapons in the hands of a man who had been legally prohibited from touching either of them since 2019. The question of where those weapons came from had one partial answer waiting. And that answer came with a federal arrest. 2 days after the shooting, on April 21, 2026, the United States Department of Justice gave the first public answer to one of the most pressing questions in the case. How did Shamarr Elkins, a man legally prohibited from possessing firearms until at least 2029, walk into 2 homes on April 19 carrying 2 weapons? Federal agents charged Charles Ford, 56 years old, a Shreveport resident, and, like Elkins, a convicted felon. Ford was charged with being a felon in possession of a firearm and with making a false statement to federal agents. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives traced the Mossberg rifle-style pistol to its original legal purchaser. That purchaser identified Ford as the person she had given the weapon to. When federal agents first sat down with Ford and asked him about it, he denied ever having the rifle. He said he had never seen it. He said he had nothing to do with it. He later admitted the truth. He kept it under the seat of his truck. He admitted he believed Elkins had taken it from him. Whether that means it was stolen, handed over, or something in between has not been fully established in public record. What is established is that a weapon traced directly to a crime scene that claimed 8 children's lives passed from one convicted felon to another, and the legal system that prohibited both men from ever touching it was nowhere in the chain. Charles Ford now faces up to 15 years on the felon in possession charge and an additional 5 years for lying to federal investigators. U.S. Attorney Zachary Keller confirmed publicly that the investigation into the full firearms acquisition chain is ongoing. The source of the handgun has not been publicly addressed. 2 convicted felons, 1 illegal weapon traced and charged, 1 weapon whose origin remains publicly unknown, a prohibition on the books since 2019, and 8 children who needed that prohibition to function. It didn't. Step back from the individual names and look at the structure of this case. Because this is where the story demands something harder than grief. It demands accounting. There was a 2019 weapons conviction on record that legally barred Shamarr Elkins from possessing any firearm until 2029. That record existed in a database. It was never activated in any way that prevented him from acquiring weapons 7 years later. There was a January 2026 VA hospitalization following a confirmed suicide attempt. He was discharged after approximately 10 days. There is no public record of a lethality screening being conducted before that discharge. There is no public record of the pending divorce being flagged as a risk factor. There is no public record of the 2019 firearms conviction being cross-referenced with his discharge plan. The VA has not publicly addressed any of those questions. There was a 2023 death threat that was heard by family members and never reported to any authority. Had it been reported, it would have been on file when he presented at the VA. It would have been relevant to the divorce proceeding. It would have triggered a mandatory lethality screening under most domestic violence protocols. It wasn't reported, so none of those systems ever had it. There was a divorce proceeding with a court date the morning after the shooting. In Louisiana, as in most states, The filing of a divorce against someone with a prior weapons conviction does not automatically trigger a lethality screening or law enforcement notification. There is no mechanism in place that connects those two systems in real time. And there was a brother-in-law who lived inside the same home, watched the deterioration happening month by month, asked directly whether Elkins needed to return to the hospital, and received an answer he had no professional training to evaluate or override. Betty Walker saw the man she raised become someone she could not fully reach. Willie Vasher saw the bald spot and kept working alongside him. Freddie Montgomery saw a father on a porch watching his children play on a Saturday afternoon. Troy Brown saw a man who was joking and calm at 9 p.m. on a Saturday night. Everyone saw a piece of it. No one had all of it. And no system was designed to assemble the pieces before they became evidence. Chief Wayne Smith stood at his Monday press conference and said something worth repeating. He said the situation stemmed from a domestic dispute, and then he added that the chances were good this was not the first time, suggesting prior incidents that were never reported, never documented, never entered into any record that could have changed what came next. Never reported. That phrase runs through this entire case like a current. The threat in 2023. Never reported. The deterioration after the VA discharge. Never formally flagged. The Easter Sunday phone call. Never escalated. The weapons acquisition by a prohibited person. Never caught before April 19th. As of April 23, 2026, 4 investigations remain open and active. The ATF full firearms procurement inquiry into how both weapons reached Elkins. The federal prosecution of Charles Ford. The Louisiana State Police officer involved shooting investigation into the exact circumstances of Elkins's death. And the Shreveport Police Department's ongoing motive investigation. None of those have produced final public findings. In the aftermath, the Louisiana Governor's Love One Louisiana Foundation covered all funeral costs for all 8 children. The Community Foundation of North Louisiana launched dedicated survivor funds for the families. Both Christina Snow and Shaniqua Pugh are expected to survive. Shaniqua continues her recovery after multiple surgeries. Christina, who used her own voice to call for help while severely wounded, gave investigators the account that anchored the early hours of this investigation. The policy questions this case forces into the open are not abstract. Should a VA discharge for a veteran with an active firearms prohibition and a contested divorce trigger automatic cross-agency notification? Should the filing of a divorce against someone with a prior weapons conviction mandate a lethality screening before the process moves forward? What would it take to build a system where those 5 data points, the conviction, the threat, the hospitalization, the Easter call, the court date, are visible to a single person whose job is to connect them in real time? Those questions do not have easy answers. They do not have fast answers. But they are the questions that 8 families in Shreveport are now living inside permanently, and the weight of that permanence is exactly the reason they cannot be set aside. Jayla was 3 years old. Serayah was 11. Between those 2 ages, 8 children lived their entire lives. And on a Sunday morning in April, all of it was taken before breakfast. This case is not closed. The Ford prosecution is moving forward. The full firearms trace has not been made public. The complete account of what happened between 9 p.m. on April 18th and 5:55 a.m. on April 19th has never been officially released. Louisiana State Police have said the investigation will not be rushed. The Caddo Parish District Attorney's Office is waiting on findings. When those answers come, this channel will be here. And speaking of cases that force the same questions about systems that failed before the worst could happen, the next case on this channel involves a family. A warning that was made to authorities weeks in advance, a paper trail that existed, and a tragedy that happened anyway. The one detail that investigators found inside that home changed the direction of the entire case. That story is next. Do not miss it.